It's coming up to 6 months since the Quest 3 had launched, and since then we've had new games, accessories, price drops, and Mark Zuckerberg making some wild claims.
I think the Quest is the better product, period.
But in this video, I will tell you why the Quest 3 isn't just Mark Zuckerberg's favourite headset, but actually is the best pound for pound VR headset that you can buy today. So I got my Quest 3 from launch, and since then I've played tons of different games, tested a ton of different accessories, and I genuinely think that this is the coolest piece of tech that I currently own. I love games. I play on 3 consoles exclusively. 3 exclusively, it doesn't really sound that doesn't really sound like exclusive, but I play on 3 different consoles. I play on my PS5, my Nintendo Switch, and my Quest 3. I didn't really get a ton of time to game, and the Switch is pretty much mainly if I'm playing with the kids. Well, I'm not impartial to having a quick Pokemon session, and I really sort of enjoy the story-driven games on the PS5, along with a bit of FC24, but the majority of the time gaming, especially in the last 6 months, has been on that thing. And that is pretty interesting because I also have the PlayStation VR 2 to go with my PS5, yet for VR gaming, I don't lean towards that. I always lean towards the Quest, and I will get onto why I think that is later on in the video. But before I get into my actual experiences over the last 6 months, let's just go over very quickly some of the technicals. This is a VR and mixed reality headset. There are a huge amount of games and apps available. Now, there aren't really any exclusive games for the Quest 3 over the previous models, the Quest 2, but a lot of games in the last 6 months have had significant performance upgrades from the previous model. That makes them a lot smoother, and the graphics just a lot better, in my opinion. Essentially just making use of the more powerful processor that they have on board. The lenses, the pancake lenses, are probably the biggest and most significant upgrade in my opinion. Having these large pancake lenses allows for just a much sharper and clearer experience with a lot less fiddling and adjusting and things that sort of break your immersion. They allowed a significant size reduction to the headset, and they're virtually eliminating issues that plague other headsets, like having to have a sweet spot. Now, the screens are LCD, unlike the competitors like the PlayStation VR 2, which has OLED HDR screens, and those are probably some of the sort of best parts of the PlayStation VR 2, having that sort of much better brightness and much clearer dynamic range. Now, battery life isn't as high on the Quest 3, but this is understandable due to sort of the increased performance and power that this thing is using, especially with mixed reality incorporated into that. But we knew all of those things after launch. What has the last 6 months looked like? Now, initially the comfort was a slight increase from the Quest 2. Now, despite the strap being pretty much identical, there was slight differences, but in terms of comfort wise, it was almost exactly the same. The actual form factor of this headset, the fact that it's closer to your face, means moving around and stuff like that is just much more of a comfortable experience. Now, it still isn't perfect. The benefits of getting a separate third-party head strap, I think, are clear. If you use this thing regularly, getting some sort of third-party head strap, I think, will go a long way to making your experience just a slightly more positive one. It allows it to balance better on your head without providing too much pressure in certain spots. Using more padding and stuff like that, it's just a much nicer experience. Now, next, the face pad. Now, this thing is sort of designed to fit as many faces as possible, and the same with any sort of thing like that. If you're trying to fit as many things as possible, you actually just fit no one perfectly. A sort of jack of all trades kind of swap deal that you're doing. Now, you can get third-party little cushions, which is what I've done just to make it a little bit nicer. So I'm using AMVR's little face pad. It just adds a much softer cushion, which just makes this thing a little bit nicer to use, and actually gets you a little bit closer to the lenses as well, which increases the field of view that you have. But in my opinion, I was sort of expecting it to soften after a little bit of time, and it's just very firm. It's better than the Quest 2's by far. It's a much nicer material, but it's not overly comfortable. Now, as I said earlier, battery life can be an issue. Especially when I first got this, I was definitely noticing that the headset would die before I wanted to stop playing. And when I had the Quest 2, I always found that I was sort of ready to finish when the headset was about to die. Now, that is obviously a bit of a downer. The easiest solution to fix that is another third-party accessory. So maybe if you're going to get a head strap, you go for a battery head strap, and that's a head strap that has a battery in the back. There are tons available. I haven't tested them all. I've tested a fair chunk of them on the channel, so you can look it up. The one I use is the Kiwi Design battery head strap. It's a really decent high quality one. I've got the little Kiwi Design stand there which charges it with the stuff. It's very, very cool. I've done a video on it. You can check it out. That's personally what I would recommend. I am very aware that the cost of your Quest 3 is slowly climbing. Now, the controllers, in my opinion, are the nicest VR controllers that you can get, and purely it's just because of the form factor. Because they're so small, they just feel just really nice. They're pretty much exactly the same shape as the Quest 2 controllers, except the big tracking rings have been taken off. Now, it does affect the tracking slightly, so if you are sort of moving your controllers in a way where the sort of face of them is facing away from the headset, you might find that you do lose your tracking slightly. Now, honestly, this is an issue that I very, very, very rarely ever notice. The tracking on these sort of headset-based tracking systems for controllers is never going to be perfect. If you put it behind your head, you're not going to be tracking it. It does a pretty good job of estimating where the controller is, but it's not perfect. And if you're playing games where you need to be in those positions and using your controllers with precision, you're going to find that that's quite difficult. I always find with games where I'm using a bow and arrow, I only need to move my arm back towards my face, and therefore the tracking is still there. For people who are moving it behind their head, I don't think that's how you're meant to even use a bow and arrow, so just stop doing that. Just hold it to here. But if you were to move it behind your head, your tracking would be bad and your aim would be bad. So just pull back to here. Now, if this is something that is going to bother you and you definitely want the tracking to be as good as possible, you can do what you can do in all of these situations where there's issues, and you can throw money at the problem. And you can get the Quest Pro controllers, which are compatible with the Quest 3. They have their own tracking internally in the actual controller. They have their own sensors and cameras and stuff. So they track themselves like your headset tracks itself. That's going to be a much better and more precise way of tracking. However, that will set you back another £300 just for better tracking, which, if you want to do it, you do it, but you could buy a Quest 2 for that, so just have a little think. Now, moving on to the games and the game library. I'm going to do a separate video about particular games. I might do a video about all of my favourite games, and I will do some videos on games that you want me to try. So if there's a particular game that you want my opinion on, stick it in the comments below and I'll go and do it. But as a sort of general review of the games on the Quest as a whole, my opinion is very positive. Now, when I talked about this with the Quest 2, when I did my Quest 2 review quite a while ago, my main point was that most of the games on VR are more like mobile games than they are like actual AAA games. And that's somewhat still true. There are some better, higher quality games now, especially since the Quest 3's been out. So you've got Assassin's Creed Nexus, you've got Asgard's Wrath 2, you've got Arizona Sunshine 2, and these are games that run fairly well on the Quest, especially on the Quest 3, and they are better and more fleshed out games. But it's not just those kind of games, because those are the games that tend to set you back a fair amount of money. You have adventure games, puzzle games, driving games, flying games. You have the higher end games, and then you have free games. Most of the sort of standard games are actually quite cheap for games, considering now on a PS5 you're paying 80 quid for a brand new game. The fact that the majority of the content on the Quest 3 is £10, £20. I mean, that's pretty good. And you know what? After I upload this video, I will do a post on Twitter. And if you want a free game of your choice, go follow me on Twitter, and I'll do a giveaway to a lucky commenter. So let's do it. But not only that, you also have like 2D cloud gaming with Xbox Game Pass that you can do on the Quest. You can actually connect a controller to your Quest headset, and you can play normal games like you have a console attached, but it's just cloud gaming. How clever is that? It's amazing. Honestly, there's a pretty great collection of games on the Quest. There's huge variety. There's great free games. There's a lot of terrible games out there too. And like I said, I can go into more detail about particular games, but the Quest Store is the best VR gaming store out there, aside from probably Steam VR. Hello. I've been interrupted by my dog. This is Crumble. Say hello, Crumble. Now, moving on to mixed reality. This is the big selling point. This is the thing that everyone was excited about with the Quest 3. I mean, even I'm guilty of making these videos. And honestly, that was one of the main things I wanted to do this review for, because after quite a bit of time, some of the novelty of these things do wear off. Even the novelty of VR wears off eventually. But that idea of mixed reality, where there's things happening in the room around you, is a very, very cool idea, and is taking off, especially with the Apple Vision Pro and stuff like that. But honestly, with the Quest 3, I'm a little bit bored of it. It did wear off. I like the pass-through, it's a lot grainier than people initially thought it would be. Like, the videos you record from it in the headset look a lot clearer, and if the lighting is bright and really good, then the pass-through is very good. As soon as it starts getting dark, it's like any other camera, it struggles in low light, so things get grainier. If I turn the lights off, in fact, Alexa, office off. Now, things start getting a bit grainier now, just because I've turned all my lights off and so the camera's sort of having to bump everything up. It's exactly the same with the headset. The more light and essentially data it's being able to get, the better a picture is going to be able to do. And if it doesn't have that much light, it's going to make it a little bit grainier. Now, the actual things you can do with mixed reality, again, I was sort of hoping for more, especially from some of the things that you see with the Apple Vision Pro that they can do now. I was sort of hoping for that to come a lot sooner with the Quest. I was seeing things where people had pictures on their walls and stuff like that, and they were sort of personalizing their own virtual space within their normal physical space, and that was really cool. But that's just not the reality with this thing. You have your virtual home that you get on any VR headset, and then if you go into pass-through mode, your virtual home is just your home. You can't personalize it in any way more than your normal home. The only sort of virtual elements that are in your home is the screen, like the sort of main menu. And you can do extra things. So you can bring up your computer screen on that. You can bring up YouTube and stuff like that in that. But that's pretty much it. And unless I'm missing something, that's all I've been able to do with it. So it's not that exciting, honestly. You can bring up multiple windows, but they're all sort of fixed in one place. I'd like to be able to sit at my desk, have my window for my Mac, clearly see my keyboard, which I can't really. Have multiple windows, have a small window with one particular app running. And that sort of frustrates me that it's not just there yet. The software just isn't quite that user-friendly just now. Like mixed reality gaming, again, for me, it was very cool. And it was good as a concept, the fact that you can sort of have things bouncing off of items of furniture in your house. That's very cool. But it just loses its novelty factor after a little while. And honestly, every game that I really enjoy playing on this headset is a normal VR game. The only mixed reality part of gaming I really like is when you can sort of see your room, so you know you're not going to run into a wall. So if there's a game that doesn't require full immersion, like for example the boxing game, you can do boxing in mixed reality, so they're in your room, and it means that I can actually walk around in my space feeling quite confident that no one else has walked into that space because I can see my room. So that element of it I like, but other than that, it is just a novelty and I don't think it's necessary. The part of mixed reality I think would be really good is the sort of work side of it, and that's what the Apple Vision Pro has aimed for with their headset, and they've absolutely nailed it from all points and purposes. I mean, Apple Vision Pro calls it spatial computing, and I guess the spatial computing aspect of the Meta Quest 3, even though Mark Zuckerberg says,
I think the Quest is the better product, period.
It just isn't. The thing that Apple has always done very, very, very well with all of their sort of ecosystem since the beginning of time, especially since the iPhone, is that it just works, and it works really well. You can't get native 2D apps without having to go through a back door and put them on the headset. If you want to have normal 2D apps in your 3D space, it just doesn't work like that on the Quest. And you can't have multiple things like immersive apps running side by side with normal 2D apps. On the Vision Pro, you can have your sort of 3D things in certain apps working alongside your normal apps at the same time. That doesn't happen. You either have your normal 2D basic windows for browsing around on the headset, or you have your 3D games and apps. My hope is that Meta sort of take note of what Apple are doing, and they sort of take the good bits of it and incorporate it in. I mean, in theory, the Quest 3 has the capability of doing a lot of those things and incorporating a lot of the sort of normal Android apps. It's running Android. Just incorporate the Android Play Store into your thing. Get those 2D apps working. It would just be... I feel like it would just be an easy win. And I think that's the case for the software as a whole, not just the mixed reality aspect. Even when you go into the settings of the headset, it's just so clunky and everything just is awkward to use. Like the hand tracking is really good, and I use the hand tracking quite a lot if I want to use anything which isn't sort of gaming wise. I think the Quest does the hand tracking brilliantly. It's fantastic, but the actual thing I'm using the hand tracking for is just clunky. Like, if they were amazing at tracking my hands, but I just don't want to use it because the actual software is just a bit faffy, why would I do that? Like, I'm just going to use my laptop to do browsing on the internet. I'm not going to use my VR headset because it's just easier to use my laptop. Do you know what I mean? Meta haven't even incorporated their own apps like WhatsApp and Instagram into their own things pre-installed on the headset. You have to go digging for them. I feel like they could just make it an easy win. You sign into your Meta account and it automatically signs you into all of your Meta related things, but it doesn't. I think the software on it is just far too clunky to make this anything other than a VR gaming machine. Now that's what this truly is at heart, a gaming machine. And it is the best on the market at this particular thing. Even compared to the PSVR 2, which is powered by a next-gen console. I have the PlayStation VR 2, and honestly, I only pick it up to play Gran Turismo 7. And that's because the VR mixed with my racing simulator, wheel and all that stuff, it's just fantastic. And honestly, if some fantastic driving simulator games were to make their way to the Quest, along with support for like my Logitech steering wheel and stuff like that, I'd probably use my Quest for that too. The reason is almost exclusively the lenses, along with the lack of wire. I can play it in any room very easily, but everything is just so clear. The PlayStation VR 2 just has this terrible sweet spot. It's the more I use it and the more I use the Quest 3, the more I realise how bad the PlayStation VR 2 is. I'm just adjusting the headset all the time just to get it perfect. And even then, it's like you look to the sides and everything's blurry. For some reason, it just makes me, when I want to use VR gaming, I just immediately go towards my Quest 3. The Quest 3 is by far the best standalone VR headset, arguably the best VR gaming headset on the market. It has a huge way to go, software-wise, to catch up and be a great spatial computer, but the tech is here. Hopefully we'll see those improvements in time, but that's the Quest 3. I'm Sam, and I'll see you in the next one. Whoop!